Moving on. I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to do several things, some of which I already know and some of which I will decide when the time comes. First of all, I'm going to deal with this shape, this leaf, in a way that is really just about trying to establish sort of, it's not quite back to square one, as you can tell, but I'm thinking of it a little in that way, and then I'm trying to create sort of an underpainting background, just establish, mostly really all I'm worried about is to see if I can somehow get rid of that obvious stripe. So like I think I might have said, I'm going to bring in some, I switched over to this smaller palette, so hopefully you can see easier what colors I'm actually using. But I'm thinking the cobalt teal for this, and I have some dioxazine purple I might squeeze in, and maybe some of that quinacridone pink, like the I've been using for the grays, these grays. I just happen to have, that's not what I want, some cobalt teal that spilled over to that part of my palette, so that's why I'm not grabbing here, but then I was trying to grab it from there, and that was good. Okay, so a little cobalt teal. I'm just going to paint this whole shape, and kind of, except for the that one sort of stripe, which I'm not sure exactly what it is. I think it's probably, this is a shape that I've never quite, I don't think I've quite made peace with, because I'm pretty sure in the original reference photo it's another Plumeria petal from an additional flower, but I've sort of wanted to treat it kind of like a different leaf, a different something, because I want it to be a little darker in this corner to help move the eye towards the focal point. What would happen if I started popping in a little bit of dioxazine purple? Hopefully one of the things you're learning by either just your own painting or watching these is that the whole notion that watercolor is completely unforgiving is perhaps true for some people, but not true for me, and not true for a lot of watercolor artists. It does take some sort of letting go, maybe, of what your original vision was, and heaven forbid, thinking of creative solutions. But there's a lot of changes you can do. So that's already looking better, and I have a hunch that if I used even a little bit more of the cobalt teal, that was fun. Squeezed it in there, and I've probably already said it, but I'm just mostly trying to get it so this shape doesn't have an obvious stripe where I don't want an obvious stripe. And I know it's going to get darker, but I'm trying to not worry about too many things at once. I'm going to grab a smaller brush because I want to drop in a little bit more pigment. especially the teal. Maybe the teal mixed with the purple slightly, but maybe not. Ooh, that was a messy brush. But I was wanting a smaller brush because dropping it in with that bigger brush was by definition bringing in more water than I wanted. So with a smaller brush I can still drop in some pretty concentrated color, decent amounts, and yeah, it's certainly looking splotchy right now, but I do have a sense that coming back over it and glazing will work really nice. And since I'm here, I will paint this guy a little bit darker green. The leaf that's there. Where's the guy I was looking for? There you are. It's that number 4. I've been using several brushes, and partly because I wasn't exactly sure where some of my brushes were. If you can believe that. Look at me, I'm mixing some of this phthalo green blue shade, and this is some spilled over ultramarine blue, which takes it into a nice dark blue-green. It's a little bit different than when you're mixing the phthalo green with the phthalo blue. This is phthalo green blue shade with ultramarine blue. And mostly just sort of getting darker, and I'm gonna do I'm gonna just drop in I'm gonna mess up that edge is what I'm gonna do, but I just dropped in a little bit of water, and it will sort of disperse things and make it a little bit more interesting. And I could worry about that part right there, but hopefully you watched my ones about scrubbing, and I'm going to deal with that in a separate stage. And now I'm gonna do some darker blues and greens on these guys over here. Apparently they have a gender. Sure, that might be some purple. It's no, that's blue. That's ultramarine blue. So that's kind of what I'm using for over here for some darker greens and blues, is the phthalo green blue shade and ultramarine blue. Like I've said several times, there's so many great color combinations, and if you're ever just looking for something to do because you're either sick of what you're painting or not quite sure what to paint next, make something like this where I'm just mixing dioxazine purple and phthalo green blue shade in this particular sample, and purple and burnt orange. And that's a fairly recent discovery for me of these mixes that I haven't done a whole lot, but there's a bunch of beautiful stuff going on in here, desaturated and grayed out things that I think are really nice, and wouldn't have known, may have figured out eventually, but now I know it that much more. So these shapes are going to be, I want to be sort of dark. Typically I'm getting darker anytime I'm getting towards the edge of the paper, which helps, I think I mentioned, to sort of steer the viewer's eye back to the middle. It's a little bit of the green, a little bit of the blue. And I'm overlapping this bud here, and that's going to be just fine, especially knowing my sort of lifting technique that I'll be doing it towards the end. You know, I just accidentally put some quinacridone paint on my finger, so now I'm kind of curious. Yeah, it's a little too watery, but what would happen if I... not a lot, but kind of interesting. Mostly just trying to push these background shapes further into the background. And these three guys I would think of more as being the middle ground. Seems pretty blue, but I like that. Bluish, purplish, grayish, and a touch more green. And something like this will begin to look really sort of separated and not unified, like one shape is painted, which is exactly what I'm doing, so it makes sense. But what I will be doing eventually is treating this whole thing as one shape, this negative corner shape as one, and wetting that and squeezing in some color here and there, and that'll sort of fuzz it up as well as unify what that color is, or just what sort of colors, I should say. I should have finished that thought before I looked to what I was going to paint next, which is this little thing I haven't really, this little continuation. That pinky is a dangerous pinky right now, I'm just telling you. I should rinse that. It would be very easy to stick my pinky down right there to get some, to stabilize my brush stroke, and then there would be a lovely quin pink splot right in that. So just this shape, just sort of trying to get an idea of how it's rounded. A little bit darker on the left side than the right side. I'm gonna, for this one, I'm gonna start trying to address the individual shapes here. So I'm gonna just pick this particular one right now, and kind of like I did for the whole shape, to try to round out the whole thing, I'm gonna put a little bit of A little bit of color there, rinse it out, and then come back with water on this side. It might have been a little too much water, but that's okay. And that's the idea. I'm going to actually get a even smaller brush, this guy, and see if I can make that even a little bit more pronounced as rounder with a little more dark color on the left side of that little shape. And now it's sort of not as blending as well, so it doesn't seem like, but I got the paint out of my brush, and so that's definitely getting there. I'm going to do this one now. I don't want to do anything adjacent to that. I think I'm going to stick with this brush for now. And this is a kind of a tricky shape. I think what I'm going to do is mostly just, this whole shape is on the left side of the overall cylindrical form, so it needs to be, as we already did, darker overall. I'm sort of using some of the paint that's in the adjacent shape, which is a green, so that's really not, like, that'll mix and get darker with this pink, but it might get darker in a unattractive way. So what I'm going to try to do is bring a tiny bit of dioxazine purple to make this even a little bit darker. Ooh, I'm sort of, that's okay. Each of these shapes starts giving way to wherever my brush goes sometimes. So that's not quite as gentle of a blend as I want for right there, although it is good to squint and make sure that I'm not just being a fussy artist. What am I going to do? I'm going to try to bring in a tiny bit more of the pink and see if I can blend that a little bit more, so it's a little bit more gradual. Yeah, something like that. I think that's going to be good. And I'm going to do something, a similar sort of thing for this one over here. It's again making sure that that wasn't quite enough color. But this is the, ooh, there's a terry cloth hair in there. That's a little bit of darker Quin pink, and here's a little dioxazine purple. Oop. do the something similar for this one. It's not going to be as dark as that side, but I'm still grabbing a touch of dioxazine purple. Maybe a little bit more quin pink. So that's a more subtle change, just to sort of show the roundedness of that individual shape within the overall roundedness of the entire shape. Hopefully that made sense. Since I have your attention, why not? I will. I've been wanting to go just darker green in a couple different areas, and likely sort of just lift back some color as well. And I'm going to do that here as well as here. Now that I think about it, that shape is still wet, isn't it? But I really want to paint this. I'm just going to sort of try to go up to the edge but not have it touch right there. And I'm grabbing some phthalo greens. Some phthalo blue might be kind of fun as well. Ooh, that was a lot of phthalo blue. I like to go back and forth between mixing the phthalo green with phthalo blue sometimes and the ultramarine blue sometimes. They can both get pretty darn dark, and sometimes all three. But for just enough, just subtle variety. I think that's a good idea in general, with at least the way I like to paint. Subtle variety. Sometimes obvious variety, but if not obvious, at least subtle. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that like that. That seems fine. That seems kind of nice. Let's hope. Too bad it won't dry like that, is what I sort of like to joke about. But I'm gonna do this whole shape up here, even though I've sort of scrubbed this one out. And might consider that the way I want it, but it's not quite the way I want it. It didn't come out kind of curved enough. And one of the whole aspects of what I was talking about there was just this back and forth between painting something really pretty dark and then thinking of it as erasing something out. I seem to be favoring the phthalo blue at this point. Maybe a good study would be to do something like this, which is phthalo green for both of them, and then mixed with one side phthalo blue and the other side ultramarine blue. Perhaps I'll do that in video fashion. But the darker I get this stuff, these background shapes, hopefully you're noticing the more quote-unquote white the petals become. And it's just the fun reality of contrast of values. Something dark against something light enhances each. The quality of lightness and darkness in each. That may be off camera. Sorry if it was. But now I'm grabbing, that's a bit of the ultramarine blue. And I'm just in a kind of mood to squeeze it right now. I'm going to drop in a little bit of, mostly this shape sort of goes from dark value to really dark value. I'm going to try to just enhance the darkness of where one shape meets the other shape. The one I was using seemed like it was bringing in a little too much water. So I'm grabbing some ultramarine blue with this smaller brush and dabbing it in. It's sort of like a drop shadow effect when you're using Photoshop or something. But I find it nice. If not exactly realistic, that's okay. And man, I may eventually get to putting in some actual indigo over here, but I don't want to get too crazy just now. That's plenty for one video. That was a lot. That was fun. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you soon.